welcome back to the Calm and Connected podcast. I'm your host, Janine Halloran, and today I had the pleasure of interviewing Jennifer Cohen Harper. She is a mindfulness and yoga educator, an author, public speaker, and a mother, and she works to support children in the development of strong inner resources. She's the author of the popular Thank You children's book series, including the new release Thank You Breath, which we talk about today. And she's also created yoga and mindfulness-based card decks, activity books, and other resources for children and families. If you've ever seen me give a talk for PESI or other places, you will have heard me speak about her resources, because I think her resources are incredible for yoga and mindfulness. And I'm thrilled to be able to talk more in depth with her about Thank You Breath and ways that we can support children in learning how to breathe deeply, how we can model as parents and educators and those who are supporting kids, and just talking in general about having children develop their strong inner resources. So I hope you enjoy our conversation. Thank you so much, Jen, for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk with you.
So I have been a fan of your work for a really long time. I was talking with you before we started recording, and I was saying I took one of your classes several years ago. But for people who don't necessarily know you, can you just give a little bit of your background and a little bit of your where you came from and what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. I live in New York, and I'm a mom, and I've got my dog behind me. And, I've always really loved working with children ever since I was a child. I was one of those 12-year-old babysitters, and it never kind of wore off. And in 2006, I started an organization called Little Flower Yoga. And at the time, I was working for Harlem Children's Zone, teaching kindergarten. When I started Little Flower, the thing that I was doing to support my own well-being was yoga and mindfulness. And so it was a very natural thing to bring those skills that I was using, that I was learning, that I was integrating into my own life, into my work with the kids. And it was one of those things where every minute that we didn't have to be doing something else, this is what we were doing. And it was everyone's favorite time of the day. So, I started this organization while I was still there, mostly because I was getting so many other requests for sharing these practices. And it was at a time when there wasn't really a lot of yoga or mindfulness for kids at all, but certainly not in schools. So, fast forward, 17, 18 years, and a lot has changed. And mindfulness and yoga for children, for educators, for families are much more accepted, much more popular. But my foundation was really in sharing these practices primarily with kids who'd experienced a lot of trauma. I also, before working at Harlem Children's Zone, was working in the children's program at a residential domestic violence shelter. And that was the very first place I ever shared yoga with kids. And so, that sort of foundation in helping kids better understand their own internal experience and really make decisions about who they want to be in the world, and actively act in their own interests, right? And make choices that support their own well-being is something that I've been passionate about my entire working life. And these practices, the breath work practices, the movement practices, the mindfulness practices, the relationship practices, really all in my world, in my work, come together to support kids building their inner resources, knowing how to use their inner resources, but not just in this sort of I can do it way, also in a I know how to build healthy relationships way without losing myself. Because that's what I think a lot of the kids in my life, in my working life, were doing. Were losing themselves, trying to figure out how to be safe. Yes. And I've always been working towards supporting their understanding of like what your body and your mind and your breath and your nervous system are doing to keep you safe are great right now. And, and there are other ways to be in the world. So, I've been teaching in schools, community spaces for a long time. I teach professional development for educators, for mental health care providers. And then about 5 years ago or so, I published my first children's book, which, was so amazing. And it gave me an opportunity to really share and speak directly to kids, as my professional life had moved towards doing a lot of professional development for adults. So kind of coming back to the direct work with kids through these books has been so much fun and just really, really joyful for me.
Oh my gosh. And I have to say, I love them. I actually have one of your books here that I actually got a chance to preview. Thank you, Pessy. So Thank You, Breath, which I think is a gorgeous, gorgeous book. So I talk about deep breathing all the time because I think it's so important. It's one of those things that is often overlooked for kids, but it is a way that kids can learn how to like figure out what's going on in their body and get themselves to a calmer place. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are and like what mistakes people sometimes make when they're trying to teach kids to use their breath.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think a lot of us hear this idea and understand it, that the breath is a really powerful tool, right? And we talk about like the breath being sort of your most direct access point to your nervous system. But it always makes me think of that whole, like, power can be used in a lot of different ways kind of thing, because, I think a lot of people think about just breathe and you'll calm down. But we actually forget that the way you breathe can bring your energy up just as easily as it can bring your energy down. So I think there's two mistakes, or, I say mistakes, but it's also like, when we try, it's always an experiment. And I kind of feel like it's more like a try it, see how it goes, make a tweak, in life and parenting and teaching, caregiving in general. So, I don't necessarily think of it as mistakes, but two places where I see things really go sideways, where like the intention that the adult has is not actually the impact that is experienced by the kid, is in two places. One is telling kids to take a deep breath without being thoughtful and specific about how that might go. So, when we breathe, when we take big inhales, especially through the mouth, or when we start breathing quickly, that really escalates. For some people, escalates anxiety. It can raise your heart rate. It increases energy in the body. So what I see most often is a kid getting really upset, an adult saying, take a deep breath, and one of two things happen. Either the kid's kind of like, it feels dismissive, right? And we'll talk about that in a minute. Or if the kid tries to do it, and you can picture like a kid who's crying or upset or having a tantrum, what usually happens is that kid takes a big, giant inhale through their mouth. And that actually does the opposite of what we're trying to do, right? Because when we're trying to use our breath to settle the nervous system, what we want to do is focus on the exhale. We want to slow the breath down. We want to try to support that child in breathing through their nose if possible. But really, an easy way to think of it is that the inhale is the part of the breath that raises energy, and the exhale is the part of the breath that settles energy. It's a little more complex, but it's a useful simplification. If you tell a kid to take a deep breath and you see them like breathing in with this really big inhale, there's a mismatch between your offering and what is happening, right? That kid is actually becoming more escalated by taking those big, deep inhales. Right. So I always say, we have to work on finding other language to encourage kids to pay attention to their breath, right? And one of my favorites is just, I'm here breathing with you, and make your own breath really steady, focus on your exhale, breathe in a way that's audible to the child, and basically offer them an anchor, right? A co-regulation anchor. It's really natural for kids to attune to our energy, our heart rate, our breath pattern. That's nature, right? So to me, like, the best way to get your kids' breath settled is to settle your own. So that's the first thing, and I'll pause there. And then I got another one.
I think that's a great thing. I've actually looked on your Instagram, and you've talked about this before, because whenever I give a talk, and I talk about deep breathing every single time, and the thing I always say is, when you tell a kid to take a deep breath, they end up either like taking this really big inhale and then they're not exhaling, or they're hyperventilating, like they're breathing really fast. And that's like, neither one of those things is going to be helpful for the child in the moment. So you have to have a structure around it, something that's going to be helpful to them. I love that idea of like just thinking about inhaling, making things a little bit bigger, and exhaling, making it. Yeah, I love that language that you use. And it makes it so much less, I don't know, for kids, it can feel like, oh, like when you say just calm down or just take a deep breath, like you're not actually listening to them. It feels like that, I think, for kids, even if you're really like genuinely trying to help them, they feel like, man, why are you doing? Like, stop it. Like, listen to me. I'm having a moment.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it feels that way for adults too. It's the same as saying like, calm down, know, and like, it feels infuriating. It feels dismissive. It feels like you're not on my side, and I think, and I also think kids get confused because they're like, what are you talking about? Like, especially if they're like pouring their heart out to you, and they're really mad, or they're really, if you come at kids with this sort of just calm down or take a deep breath, I think part of what they hear in the background is, I, grown up, am uncomfortable with your big feeling right now, right? Like, I don't think they often interpret it as this grown up is trying to help me. I think they interpret it as this grown up is trying to help themselves, right? Like, this grown up can't deal with me. And there's all sorts of, there's all sorts of like internalization of that can happen, and shame and suppression of emotions, and all the things that we are trying not to do, right? So, and I think we can really avoid a lot of those miscommunications and misunderstandings if we intentionally teach kids breath work practice in moments when everything is okay. Yes. And I think that's my second sort of big takeaway is like, we cannot just throw these things at our kids when they're having a hard time and expect them to be useful. And that's why I'm so passionate about teaching what I think of as these like inner resource skills. We all have inner resources. It's not like we're giving them to our kids, but they don't necessarily have easy access to them. They don't necessarily know when to use them. They don't necessarily feel that they will be effective if they haven't had ongoing experiences of the impact. So to me, breathwork practices really need to be taught and experienced in moments of calm connection, right? Like, I need to work with my kids on these practices, not only when everything's sort of generally going okay, but when we're attuned to each other, when we have moments of really attuned, healthy connection, so that I can be sure that what I'm offering is landing in a way that really feels like it's for them, instead of like a lecture or like a for me, or like a you need to figure out how to behave kind of way, right? So even if it's not just that it needs to happen when it's not a meltdown, it needs to happen when there's like active connected attunement, or there's still that space where it could be interpreted as like, you're trying to teach me how to behave so that I'm not annoying to the grownups. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. As opposed to this is going to help you manage your big feelings, because it's okay for you to have your big feelings. Big feelings are normal and part of life. But how do you how do you walk through life without like punching holes in walls and things like that when you get angry? Angry is fine. Angry is okay. Angry is great. But what do you do with that anger? And how does that come out? And how do you help yourself go through it? It's almost like a mindset shift for the adult and for the kid in a way. So they understand, like, you're not trying to like control me or help me behave. I'm trying to teach you skills. I'm trying to teach you ways that you can help yourself as you get to be a grown up, because you're going to eventually be a grown up and you have to learn how to do these things.
Yeah. Well, and also like kids don't like feeling out of control. It's scary to them, right? So those big feelings, you know, it's important for us to help them understand that they can fully feel their feelings without their feelings taking charge of their actions. And I don't think our kids always know that, you know, and I think it makes them scared of their feelings sometimes. So, you know, I think it's one of those things where we can teach them breathwork practices, movement practices, you know, that with the intention, like the real heartfelt intention of like, my goal is not to get you to calm down. My goal is to help you feel more safe in your own skin, to help you feel like feelings are okay because you're not scared of how they will make you act, right? And that we don't always have to say those words, but I think when that's like in our heart, it comes across differently to our kids. And of course, also like as you talk about sort of these are skills you're going to need as an adult, we have to remember like we get to model those skills or not right now, right? So like it's going to fall really flat if we're saying to our kids, like, here is this stuff that you can use to help yourself, but they see us in our day-to-day life, like losing it and not using our tools, right? So that is also really important. Like we can't authentically share something that we're not at least working on internalizing for ourselves. So I'm like, with my own kids, I'm like real upfront and very obvious about what I'm doing. Like if I'm getting escalated, I'll say, right, I'll like narrate my own experience for them. And really sometimes even be like, I need to step away and I'm going to do some heart and belly breath right now. And in like, if I wasn't trying to model it for them, I might not be so like narrating myself. I might like go to a different space, but it's really important to me that they know not only that they're learning from the modeling, but that they know I'm just like them, right? That I'm still working on this, that I'm not always doing it right, that I'm not always going to succeed at nervous system regulation, that I have to like practice just like them. So that way, you know, I know my kids, like sometimes they'll shy away from things that they don't think they can get right. And it's important to me that they know this isn't a right or wrong thing. This is like a lifelong practice thing.
Yes, I think you've hit on something that's so important. It's that modeling piece. And it's okay. It's perfectly imperfect. You don't have to be a perfect parent. You don't have to be a perfect teacher. But what you can do is you can be a great model. So just like you were describing narrating yourself, I sometimes will do that too. You know, I'm getting frustrated, so I'm going to take a walk around the block. I will literally say that out loud to my children if I'm having a hard time. And so that they know, like, it is normal and okay for you to have emotions, and adults have them too, and adults have bad days. But you need to figure out as an adult, like, how can you still have your emotions and cope with them in safe and healthy ways? And it sounds like you're doing that too. And I think it's so wonderful that you're able to narrate that, and your daughters can hear that and they see that, and your clients and the people that you work with see that, so they understand, you know, this is okay. This is what people do. Like we're just all working through things, and nobody is completely done and finished. We're all working on stuff.
And like to have a thought of like, if it doesn't go well, how are we going to repair? Right. And I've many times said to my kids, like, guess I forgot to do my work, like guess I forgot to do the thing, whatever the thing is, like if I get overwhelmed, or if in any way I'm not offering them what my most thoughtful part of myself would want to offer them, I try to be really quick to say, like, that didn't go the way I would have hoped. That's not the mom that I want to be. That's not the teacher that I want to be. Like, can we try a rewind? Like, I forgot to do my breathing, or I got a terrible night's sleep and I got to like work on that. And it's not as an excuse. It's as a way of saying, this isn't about you. This is about me, right? Like, I just had a moment. You're not at fault. Even if it was because of an interaction, my behavior is my responsibility. And I really try to like get that repair piece in there if things don't go right. And actually sometimes like the most valuable interactions are when somebody does have a meltdown, even if it's me, because then we get the opportunity to do that repair work. And sometimes that's even more powerful for our kids than if it would have just gone smoothly the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have to say, I apologize all the time when things don't go the right way. And I will say it is so powerful. I actually have a client right now who he actually ended up, he had a hard time at school one day, and a teacher ended up yelling at him. And the teacher came back later and apologized because the teacher was having a bad day and there's a lot of other things, and they were being like middle school boys. So like lots of nonsense was happening, end of the school year. And so he said, I overreacted. I'm really sorry. He repaired that relationship. And you know what? That kid is trusting that adult because that adult is telling him exactly what was going on. He's apologizing, he's repairing it, and he's being real. And that's what this kid needs. That's what kids need. They want real people who are helping and being able to say, I made a mistake. I'm so sorry. Let's move forward from this. Let's continue to work together. And he is like ready and raring to go for September because he feels like he actually can, like, this guy will be real with him. That's amazing.
So amazing. It really is.
Oh my gosh. It's really cool. So tell me about this. Tell me about Thank You Breath, and like what made you decide to work on this book? And this is part of a series, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I really love this book. I know it's like, I don't mean to pat myself on the shoulder, but like, I mean, I've written a lot of books and like card decks and books for adults. And this one's my favorite. And there's just something in it. Like, I just like feel like sweetness in it. But it's still like really, the subtitle is like Finding Peace and Power from the Inside Out. And when I think about what I want for myself, what I want for all kids, what I want for my own daughters, like that's what I want, right? Is like for them to be able to carry like peace and power inside of them and bring that to whatever situations they find themselves in. So this series is they're all like thank you books. So the first one was Thank You Body, Thank You Heart, and then Thank You Mind, and now Thank You Breath. And really, where that came from, I mean, Thank You Body really started with my own daughter, my oldest daughter, when she was younger. I noticed her paying more attention to her body in ways that I wasn't super thrilled with. She really started, as girls and boys, but, there's the little girl culture, like, she started being really aware of what she looked like pretty young. And I really wanted to counter that without shaming her for it. We do live in this culture that puts a lot of value on the way kids look. And like when she was like 4 or 5 years old, she's like looking in the mirror, like with judgment, with critique. So Thank You Body was really this attempt to kind of create something a little light and loving and non-personal. And we started doing a gratitude body scan at night before bed, right? So like thanking each part of the body for what it did today. And I really wanted her to have a relationship with her body as like an active, functional entity, right? Like something that she brought her joy, and like thinking about like my belly digested my food and gave me nutrients, and my legs helped me run. And like, so it's really, that book was really about building a sense of connection to the body as like an active piece of me, not something to be like shaped and judged and manipulated. And it was really natural to do the rest of the series because in my work, one of the things when I was saying earlier, like teaching kids about their inner resources, one of the frameworks that we use in my organization to teach kids about their inner resources is thinking about the resource of our body, the resource of our mind or mindset, and the resource of our breath. So these 3 books really fell into that space very naturally, right? It's like, how do we become more grateful for and connected to and aware of our body, our mind, and our breath. And then there's also another piece of our curriculum that's all around community, right? So like we talk about like the inner resources of body, breath, and mindset, and then the resource of community, and how do we cultivate relationships that are a resource, and that's not just like an automatic thing, right? We actually have to build it. So we have to learn how to be in right relationship and healthy relationship. And that piece is really about building a community where I can tap into the resource of the community and I can be a resource to the community. So it's a little bit of a, that's a piece that's really in our curriculum, not so much in the books yet, but you never know.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. I love that, paying attention to your body, and your work grows out of the work that you do, not only with the people that you see in terms of like educating children, but also your own. And that's just the beauty of parenting. It brings a whole nother layer to the work of working with children, because you then see it through their eyes and they're like, oh, okay, so I need to dig a little bit different layer deeper in a different way about this. It's
Absolutely.
really cool. Oh my gosh, there's
Yeah.
nothing like parenting to tell you about how to like work with children, right?
100%. I mean, so much shifted. And I was working, my oldest daughter was born in 2012. So, I was working with kids a long time before she was born, and started Little Flower a long time before she was born. But yeah, every age, like as she grows, there's like a whole nother layer, not just of what I'm learning and integrating into my work, but like what I'm interested in and what I'm learning about myself. And, it's like we like a lot of people talk about that process of like reparenting yourself. And I think it's really, it's been so interesting to me. My girls are 5 and 9, almost 10 now. And I feel like as they go through their ages and their growth, I can connect more to like who I was at that age, like it really sparks those like memories. And especially as my oldest is getting older, I have more memories, right? I have more memories of being 9 than 5, so it's been really interesting to bring into my work kind of like what my kids need, but also coming from this place of like, what did I need then? Yeah. And I didn't necessarily expect that, and as I I don't know if you can ever expect the gifts of parenting, but that was one I didn't expect, to feel like so much connection and like remembrance, like memories that I don't know that I had access to before my kids were at that age, and it kind of brought back me at that age. And that's really come into my work too, in a way that I appreciate and am enjoying.
Yeah, it's really, there's parenting. It's one of those things, like you get a baby and whatever way you get a baby, or your child comes to you, and then suddenly like everything shifts. And sometimes people can look at it like, oh, like you sort of mourn your life before, but I'm like, I'm a better person now than I ever, and I'm more self-reflective, and I'm more aware of like how I walk in the world and how I interact with other people in the world than I ever would have been if I hadn't had kids. So it's actually it really helps me in my work. And it helps me as a person. I Plus, I think I think my kids are hilarious and fun. So I like hanging out with them and stuff.
It's always helpful when you like your kids.
It is. They're just a delight. They're delightful children, and that like they make me laugh. They help me. They like if I'm having a hard time, sometimes like especially in COVID, my daughter, who after seeing me model all these things of like, okay, I'm having a hard time. This is what I do. She actually at one point said to me, she's like, I think you need a break. I think you're working too hard. I think we should go. Yeah, no, I'm serious. And I was like,
That's
oh.
amazing.
Yes, I actually do need a break. Thanks for noticing, little one. I'm gonna take a break. Let's go do something fun together. And that is again helpful for me, helpful for her, and helpful for the people that are like just in our life, in our community, in our family. So it's neat to I enjoy very much being a parent. I love it.
Awesome. I mean, and how powerful for her to be like, to notice that, to say it and see you act on it. Like, that's amazing for her to be like, oh, like really have that, like really felt experience of being able to help you. That's incredible.
No, it was one of those moments in COVID that I was like, okay, so she's paying attention. That's good to know. And she's noticing me, and she knows, she understands, like just like she can get overwhelmed, she knows that I can get overwhelmed, and that we can work together and work through it. It was actually like a very humbling and awesome moment at the same time, just because I needed somebody to be like, stop it.
It's amazing. That's so amazing.
Oh my goodness. I have just one other question that I usually like to ask people at the end of our conversations. I mean, we could talk all day. I'm just having a blast, but I want to recognize time and making sure that we're all saying, like making sure that we're being respectful of that. I'd love to know, I know that you use yoga and mindfulness. Are there other ways that you like to rest and recharge?
Oh yeah. I hang out with horses. That's really what I do, of course, yoga and mindfulness, but also those practices now are so entwined with like my work and my, like it not that they lose any of their potency, but, they've been, they have a particular sort of, energy to them that I need another complementary energy. So anyway, I mostly hang out with horses to recharge. I ride, but I also just spend time and connect and do a lot of stuff from the ground. We've got 3 family horses, 2 of them are rescues. And that's like the whole other part of my life that's not in the public so much. But it's really powerful for me. And you don't need horses, I mean, they're really phenomenal animals. But I think the things about horses that really get me sort of out of my head and into my body is like, for one, it's mostly outside. And it's like creating connection with, like a sentient being that there's not so much, pokiness about, right? Like in human relationships, there's all this complexity, and like even in our closest human relationships, there's like all these dimensions of our attachment history and our what's going on and what we need and what we want and for me, spending time with animals is like being in supportive, loving, connected relationship without all the drama of human relationships. And that's just how I feel. It's relaxing, for me, being with the animals is the easiest time for me, like not to be on my phone. And it's the easiest relationship you can ever have, I think, is even the challenging parts of animals and rescue animals. It's like there's ease in non-human relationship.
Yeah.
I love humans. I love all of my humans. But when I really need to step away and recharge, for me, being outside with animals is kind of the best way to do it.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I love that. I love that explanation. It's less I totally get it. And that's like, I was immediately thinking of my dog. I'm like, that's totally what it is. He can be a little cranky pants. Like sometimes I say it's like his poodle is showing. He's a poodle mix. And like, okay. But there's like this, there's just like this unconditional, like sort of like, but I still, I want to hang out with you. And if you could just pet me real quick, that'd be great. Like, there's just something like, it's a phenomenal thing to connect with animals. So I think that's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. When does Thank You Breath come out? Is it out yet?
No, it's still in pre-sale. It comes out July 12th. So pretty soon.
Okay, great. So I will let people know where they can purchase it. Where would you like people to go if they want to either pre-order or buy it?
Oh, thank you. I really love local bookshops. It's not gonna, you're not gonna find it in pre-sale in local bookstores, but if you like bookshop.org or one of those sites, IndieBound, like there are websites where you can actually order books and support local bookstores. And I really always like to steer people there. But you can also find it in all the normal, Amazon, Barnes and Noble type of places. But if you go to Bookshop, it's nice because you can actually select a bookstore in your neighborhood. Like you can choose a local bookstore to basically purchase the book through. So it's very easy, and you can find all the books. They don't have to actually have it in stock, right? You just like choose a bookstore to support, and then you're basically buying online. Just as easy as Amazon. You're buying it online, but through your local bookstore.
That's incredible. I love that because I am a bookstore nerd. Anytime I go someplace new, I'm always at the bookstore. Like my kids are too. We're big readers, and my husband too. So that is amazing. I hadn't actually ever thought through that. So I'm going to make sure that we share those links in the show notes. And is there a place where you'd like people to go to find out more about you and Little Flower Yoga and the work that you do?
All the normal stuff. I have a Jennifer Cohen Harper Instagram. That's just at Jennifer Cohen Harper. And that's a lot about the books and parenting and anxiety and, more about that kind of caregiver experience. Or you can check out at littlefloweryoga.com. Websites for both of them too, my name or Little Flower Yoga. And the Little Flower Yoga work is really more focused on school-based work and support for mental health care providers who want to incorporate these embodiment practices into their work. So that's a little bit more of like a professional space. Either is fine.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. It was such a great pleasure to actually get a chance to talk with you and connect. Thank you so much for coming on the Calm and Connected podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun talking with you.